was very close with a fellow from Bridgeton, New Jersey, when I was in the service from 1956 to 58. And I moved to New Jersey, which was Bridgeton, New Jersey, in 1959. I was hired by Prudential Insurance Company in 1959, March 17th, and I worked there until February of 1993. But then I was a consultant the year 2000. So I had 55 years with the Prudential Insurance Company, now called Prudential Financial.
That's good, Dad.
Okay. That's it.
All right, Andre.
Yep, my name is Andre Hodges. I currently work at the Middle Township Middle School with Mr. Hanley. Grew up in Cape May County for most of my life, and then I spent a lot of time up in Central Jersey. I'm back now in Courthouse working, and I'm just looking forward to hearing some of the stories. And that's it.
Ryan?
Well, I'm Ted Bryant. My father was a minister, so I lived in different places growing up. I was born in Camden, but I also lived in Hightstown, New Jersey, Jersey City, New Jersey, and I came down to Cape May County. We came down to Cape May County when I was in the 7th grade. Then I came back to teach at the high school that I graduated from here in Middle Township, and been here ever since. And Gloria Hodges is my sister. We're going to share some. I know some of our short stories will kind of connect.
I'm Gloria Hodges, proud to say Ted's my brother. And I was born in Delaware. And our dad being a minister, I personally lived in 8 different places throughout my lifetime. And the first place I can remember is Camden, where I started kindergarten. And then because Dad being a minister, they moved him around a lot. And I later, after Camden, we moved to near Hightstown. And Hightstown is where we lived for several years. That was one of my favorite places. We also lived in parts of Delaware. Prior to that, we lived in 3 little towns, Slaughter Neck, Delaware, Frederick, Delaware, and Felton, Delaware, all kind of south of Dover. Hightstown is where I call home because I went to high school there, and most of the friends that I connect with now are from high school. In fact, one called me this morning. And after high school, I went to Delaware State College. And after Delaware State College, by that time, my parents had moved to Whitesboro, New Jersey. And I came down here in 1966 and applied to Middle Township and worked for Middle Township for 43 years. I worked, first of all, as a self-contained teacher for about 5 years. And then I taught math at the middle school for maybe 15 years. Went back, got my master's, and did guidance counseling work at the high school for approximately 10 years. And then the last 10 years, I was the director of the Middle Township High School Guidance Department. I also worked for the Alternative Education Program and supervised that. Since then, I've retired, kind of enjoying retirement, and I'm currently on the Board of Education for Middle Township.
Donna?
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Todd, and I am a retired judge's secretary. I live with Bill and my daughter Nancy, and I have been for the last 4 years. I grew up in Bridgeton. I was born in Salem. I grew up in Bridgeton, and I graduated Bridgeton High School class of 1958. And I worked at the Cumberland County Courthouse in the judiciary as a judicial secretary for 25 years. And I was transferred to Atlantic City and was in the appellate division. And other than taking care of the Hanley group and 2 dogs and a cat, I'm retired.
All right, J-Dub.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I guess I'm the only Wildwood warrior in the bunch because everything is Middle Township on me right now. Well, I was born and raised in Wildwood. I went through the Wildwood public school systems. I was one of the upper level athletes. I graduated, went into the military, spent time in Vietnam. A lot of historical things happened to me personally as I lived in Wildwood. I was the first modern era African American lifeguard after probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years, because my predecessors, they were OGs then. I looked up to them. I had a storied sports career. I played football in Germany. I am fully retired now, suffering from all the football. My knees have been replaced. My hips have been replaced. My shoulders have been replaced. So, you know what they say about the golden years. But at any rate, I've been in the kid business probably 50 plus years, working in a variety of, a variety of settings. Special ed teacher, counselor, directing programs for delinquent boys. Now, all I do is drive a school bus and teach people to drive school buses. Boy, I love them kids. That's about it.
All right. Well, it's great to have such a diverse and experienced panel here. And I did send you some questions, and so I'll dive into the first question, and then again we can go in whatever direction we think is best. And sometimes, and I want to preface, and I'll say this so my students know this too. I love history. I mean, and my father knows that too. You know, we would sit and
sure do.
talk history growing up, and when I decided on a major, I had never had any second thoughts about it. But sometimes I'm guilty of what I don't know, and I would say that. Until I really started exploring this, I thought that, the Rosa Parks experience was happening everywhere to everyone. And, so one of my questions is that the kids might think that, African Americans were all forced to ride in the back of the bus everywhere, and that there were all signs of separate facilities for Blacks and whites. So I just like to get a sense of what your experience was in your town growing up with the separation of Blacks and whites. I mean, were there signs? Did you ever see signs? And if so, where would you have seen signs in your travels? So I'll open that up to discussion, and we'll try and give everybody their own turn to talk. So it looks like Joe's got something he wants to say.
No, all of us from Middle Township in Wildwood, I can't speak for the other communities because I do not know them. My experiences do not know them. But I think we were very, very, very fortunate to grow up where we did during those times. Okay. The reason why I say that, in Wildwood per se, we talk about the roads. Well, hey, we jumped on a bus and went everywhere, whatever, because we were smaller communities and everybody knew everybody. So there wasn't, to me, that sense. But as soon as you got down to what we call the Mason-Dixon line, you could see a change. You seen colored only on facilities, colored only on water fountains. I experienced these from a personal nature and a comical nature as I've grown to be an adult, But I just feel that all of us who lived in Middle Township, Whitesboro, some of the other smaller communities around, we were fortunate.
I agree. I lived in Hightstown. My earliest memories are Hightstown, and that was an integrated community. But what's interesting is in South Jersey here, we didn't, as Joe was saying, we didn't see the signs. We didn't have the placards up, but we did have segregation. It was based on where people lived. When I moved to Jersey City, the area and the school I went to was 90% Black. And everybody I saw every day was Black because that was where we lived.
Where was?
Yeah. And, when I came down to Whitesboro at that time was predominantly a Black community as well. and everyone went to elementary school, but we all joined at the junior level and high school level. We all were together again. And so that's the way it worked here. It wasn't signs, it was neighborhoods.
Well, I went to school, like I said, in Camden, and I believe, because I was in kindergarten, I believe it was an all-black school. And then we moved to Delaware. And in those towns that I lived in Delaware, they were segregated schools, which I can get into later. I mean, I know what it's like to be in a one-room school or a two-room. As far as seeing signs, I can't say that I ever saw any signs, but I know that when we went to a movie theater, it was roped off and we were directed to go in one direction. And we didn't mind because we were with our friends. But when you think about it, we were segregated against, there was a division at that particular time. Now, again, when you went south, that was it. You saw the sign
Screech.
in the restaurants and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, it changed, of course, when I moved to Heightstown. It was all completely, different, which was an adjustment for me again. But that's what I experienced.
So would it be safe to say, though, that that there was a significant difference, and I think you pretty much said it here, that between the North and the South and how segregation was, how it played out?
It really was, because in Camden, like I said, I went to kindergarten and first grade. Now, I don't remember whether it was integrated or not, but I was too young to really remember that or even dwell on that. But when I moved to Delaware, my second grade year, I was so far advanced from what I had learned that they skipped me to fourth grade. So that was fine. And I went through my, the next few years, of course, up until seventh grade in Delaware. Then suddenly I'm moving back to New Jersey. When I moved from Felton, Delaware to Heightstown, New Jersey, and Heightstown was a very progressive school, I was behind.
What year are we talking about, just for?
We're talking about, I would say 62 for me, around 62.
Okay.
And I had to work hard to maintain my grades and to catch up. There was clearly a year's difference between the segregated schools I had attended and the integrated school I attended in high school. I started there in 8th grade. So I caught up, but it was an adjustment for me.
Okay. I'm going to say, all right, Bill? No?
Yeah.
I was born in Parkersburg, West Virginia, but when I was after the first grade, my parents moved to a community called Huron, Ohio. It's the most southern point on Lake Erie. When you look at Lake Erie, go down to the most southern point on this, hitting the state of Ohio. That is where Huron is. I didn't even know what an African American was, except occasionally in school, the National Geographic magazine.
Wow.
We had no African Americans in our community. It was a small community, only 6,000. But I went to school there. I was active in sports. Believe it or not, I played basketball and baseball. We did not play against or have any African American on our team or in school. Now, I did know my mother and dad, I think they were racial to a certain degree, because they purposely picked Huron, Ohio out because the demographics indicated there was no minorities in that community. So my experience with the minorities, certainly very limited until I got out of high school and I entered Ohio State University. And
Woody Hayes.
what African Americans were, because 3/4 of our basketball team, who were national champions, by the way,
Wow.
national champions that year, 2 years, Jerry Lucas and
Yeah.
Bob Knight and Sigfield, you name them, all of them. The Boston Celtics, Havlicek, they were all on that Ohio State team. And I was in a
I'm gonna change channels.
and 3/4 of Mac Hall was African Americans. I learned to talk your language because I didn't know how to talk your language. And so that was my experience. And but you know what? I quickly adapt to the friendliness and the association of brotherhood. And that was important. And then, of course, other things later. I went in the military, and we'll get that later. But I went in the military, and I, of course, understood integration very well then. And so I'm very limited to my knowledge of experience I had, except the normal Caucasian experience you would have in a small community. And that was it.
Dad, can I just follow up, or William? Can I follow up? In Ohio, though, do you have any recollection at all of seeing signs about whites here, coloreds there, anywhere in your experience in Ohio?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was no issue. If there was a sign for black only, nobody would be going in the door.
Yeah, but you went to Cleveland, and
Now I did, and I'm a diehard Cleveland Indians fan. And our first black player that I think doesn't get the recognition he should, Jackie Robinson gets it all, but this guy should have got as much, Larry Doby. I was there. Yeah, I saw Satchel Paige pitch his first game in the American League. I saw it. I was there. 80,000 people saw Satchel Paige pitch. And of course, he was a legend in the Negro Baseball League. And so, yes, boy, did we accept Larry Doby and Satchel Paige, and of course, many others.
That's a different story.
They were our idols. And so that was my experience in Cleveland. I mean, no, I went to Cleveland. I visited Cleveland. I did a lot of things in Cleveland. And of course, Cleveland had its share of population of African Americans. And I guess I did whatever I would do when I was there. Right? Nothing stands out to me when I went to Cleveland. I was 50 miles west of Cleveland, so I wasn't like it was like me to Philadelphia. I didn't go there every day, on an occasion. Okay, but by the way, who mentioned Mason-Dixon line? Somebody did. Hey, Donna, do you know the Mason-Dixon line is just south of Bridgeton?
Yes, I know.
Very true. Yes, it is.
Line, part of Bridgeton is below the Mason-Dixon line. Point of interest, folks. Okay, Donna.
That's real. You know what he's talking about.
And I heard you say whoever said Mason-Dixon, it made me think about Bridgeton. Okay.
Right.
Okay, Donna.
Okay, well, having grown up in Bridgeton, I did not really experience the segregation.
What years were you there? I mean, as a reference point.
Okay, I was 9 years old when I moved there, so I would say 1949. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And I started fourth grade there. We walked to our school because we were not bused. We went to the neighborhood school, so we walked. Yeah, so we walked to school, had to come home at lunch, walk back, and so forth and so on. That's what we did.
Wow.
And then, so I was 9, and then I went to the junior high, and I lived a half a block away from the school. So there again, I walked.
Again.
And then Bridgeton High School. And, I never took a school bus. So I didn't experience that. What I did experience, though, is the influx of Japanese people we had in our school because of Seabrook Farms. And they brought all the Japanese people over they housed them in about 5 miles from Bridgeton in Deerfield Township, I think it was.
Seabrook.
And
Seabrook, yeah.
Yeah.
Seabrook Farms.
I had a lot of friends who were Japanese, and Charles Seabrook put them up in little houses, like row houses. Actually, it's almost like concentration
projects.
And but they were very, very nice people. So we had a big influx of Japanese in our class and Estonians, a lot of Estonians and Germans. So as far as the Black people, we just went to school side by side. We had no problems. I have many Black friends. I ended up working for Judge Brathwaite. Maybe some of you people know him from Atlantic County. And that's my only recollection of, I always got along with them. We had a lot of industry in Bridgeton, and they brought in a lot of migrant workers. And we had Owens, Illinois, we had Ritter's, and they sold to Hunt's, the ketchup, and a lot of sewing factories. So the Blacks and the whites worked together, and there was no problem.
I'm
Family
going
affair.
to try and shift to another topic here if we could. So again, I'm a history guy. I know history, and I know that the landmark case that ended segregation was Brown versus Board of Education. But I also know that segregation just didn't end at that case. There was a long fight that still had to be fought. So you're all kind of at that age. I guess everybody would remember 1954, but do you remember the case itself when it happened and how it impacted your life at that time? Was it even something you were thinking about as you were going through school, that, Brown versus Board of Education, or did anyone talk about it in the community?
I don't
No.
think it impacted my life. My life there was no difference in my life going to school and with the, segregation.
Mr. Bryan, you mighty quiet down there.
Well, they're too young.
Oh, Mr. Bryan, you grew up in Middle Township, Whitesboro area? Are you from that area?
From 7th grade on. So that was,
Okay.
yeah, when I came down here, it was 1964. So
Wow. Okay.
Brown versus Board of Education was 10 years old then.
Yeah.
It didn't impact Cape May County because, as we spoke of earlier, it was more of elementary in Whitesboro had its own elementary school up to 1968. And so did Rio Grande, and so did Dennis Township.
Memora?
Together in junior high school, and some of us didn't come together till high school. And so it wasn't that Brown versus Board of Education affected us. But when I went to high school in 1966 through 1968, 70, there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
Everything. We were aware of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. We were aware of the marches. It was in many ways a very tumultuous but exciting time to be in high school.
Yes. And I can relate to that very well. I think one of the things that we've talked about is, some of us are older, and I'm noticing, like I say, we have some people that are really, really taking this in because it's news to them, but we experienced that. And I'm just going to go on record. Bill, you opened up an extremely good topic, and I think you should continue because there's so much going on, so many experiences in this panel alone that it's going to go for a while. So
Yeah, well, in 1954, I was 9. And at that particular time, I was in a segregated school. I think it was a 2-room school at that time. So therefore, even though that rule came about, it did not affect us. We were still considered to be separate but equal, but we weren't separate but equal, because we didn't have the facilities, the teaching tools that were needed. I mean, what can you do when you have 3 grades in 1 room and 2 rooms in the school, So we were definitely deprived of a lot that affected our education for those years.
I have to kind of ponder that, we live in a world now where, news is funneled into our phones, and the kids, they might not even want to watch the news, but they still get it, whether they like it or not. And so I wonder, the fact that in 1954, you had to watch the network news.
ABC, CBS, NBC, what were some of the newscast oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. I mean, everybody in America watches Sky. Chuck Brinkley,
Oh, I was gonna say,
Charles
yeah,
Brinkley,
and Walter
Brink-
Cronkite.
Brinkley and what else? The other name too.
Cronkite.
Two of them.
Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I would think that something like that would, be talked about in the news media, and that you wouldn't, but in 1954, I guess it, could fly under the radar, and nobody heard it.
Well, you also have to understand that we lived in segregated areas. Many of us did not have TVs.
True.
That's the way it was at that particular time. And all the different little towns I lived in were definitely segregated. And I thought that's the way it was supposed to be, because I never saw anyone but Black people in my community and in my church and in any of the areas that I went to at that time.
See, Wildwood was totally different. Okay. Wintertime, there was, we had a Black, we had a white, we had a Puerto Rican or Hispanic origin community. And in the summertime, needless to say, it went buck wild. If a person was breathing of any ethnicity, they could be in Wildwood. Because, just I met French Canadians, I met Germans. I mean, they're coming down for vacation during the summer. That was just the way it was. You got an opportunity to meet different people. And a lot of those people from other countries, they didn't bring those prejudices with them. Because like I say, at the time, I was the only really tan lifeguard out there every day, okay?
Yeah. So while we're on that topic, Joe, some of our kids are, I've given them kind of directions to go with this project, and they're looking into how segregation and tourism were related. And I do know that there were certain beaches in Wildwood which tended to be Black beaches, but they were not officially Black beaches. It was like an unofficial thing. Could you speak to, how the beaches were in Wildwood at that time?
Generally speaking, we had on the weekends what was referred to as Chicken Bone Beach. Okay. And the reason being, that was at Young's Avenue. And the reason being, a lot of the tourists that came into Wildwood came in on buses from the city. Okay. They were bussed in. The bus parking lot was down on Young Avenue in Susquehanna behind the athletic fields. And those people would walk straight down Young's Avenue to the beach. At the time, they were allowed to bring baskets with food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how it became Chicken Bone Beach, when those beach cleaners came to go through the sand to get broken stuff, fried chicken. Let's be real, it was fried chicken, so they called it Chicken Bone Beach. And the people that were coming down, the majority of them were of color. They just went straight down the street to the beach. Boom, we on the beach, and they set up there. When the beach closed, they picked up all their stuff and went back up Young's Avenue. That way they weren't getting lost, wandering around on the beach or anything like that. Now, during the week, you'd see the locals or people that were just on a vacation go anywhere they want to go. There wasn't a problem. The guys that were lifeguards, I never met any negative, overt racial stuff. I mean, you know how you hear of subtle racism? Oh, you'll come in the locker room and there's a noose rope hanging or something like that. Didn't even experience any of that. I mean, hey, we were one group. We were a group of lifeguards doing a job of saving people, making Wildwood the safest and finest beach anywhere. So that's what I experienced.
Anyone else have any experience with the tourism industry? One of the things, I guess maybe this is again, maybe in Joe's wheelhouse, I guess, but what about hotels? Like, was there certain like hotels that, would have had a segregated clientele or not? Or, was there anything?
Again, at that time, there were several motels and rooming houses on both the west side, because primarily the west side from, say, Montgomery Avenue, okay, from New Jersey Avenue to Park Boulevard going east and west, and from Davis or Montgomery Avenue from the south going north to about Lincoln Avenue. That was predominantly the area where the community of color lived. Okay, that was the hood, so to speak. And we, at that time, there was enough rooming houses, as they used to call them. Motels were there. They didn't, and I don't know of anybody wanting to really, oh, hey, let's go to, a Caucasian hotel. They just didn't, they supported the community. And if someone did choose, say they were from, I don't know, the Midwest as an example of color, and they came to Wildwood and they didn't know, and they wanted to stay in Holiday Inn or one of the other 1,000 hotels there, motels. Okay. You got a credit card, you got the money, you sign your name, go into your room. I mean, now you may have had some cases of what I call covert racism. And I think each person on this panel of color can tell various stories about that. The covert racism is the part where, say, me as a Black man goes into a store, and all of a sudden, I'm being followed. I have a suit and tie on. I got a briefcase. I go in that store. I'm being followed. Where a Caucasian person could come in scraggly as looking as whatever and just have free run of the store. But by virtue of me being a person of color, oh, well, they're going to steal. They're going to do this. Then that security person is going to pay more attention to me. I could have $50,000 in my pocket to pay for whatever's in that store, but that's how they react. Mr. Bryan, have you had anything like that? Or Ms. Holmes, have you had any issues like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can maybe get to some examples like that. But I wanted to ask you a question, Joe, while you're talking about the beaches. That, as you said, I can remember the buses parking back there. And the people walking up to the beaches by the hundreds.
Yeah.
It was quite something to see.
Literally.
And back during that time, Joe, a lot of Black businesses between Park Boulevard and
yes, made a lot of money.
And so
My
talking
grandmother-
about change, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, my grandmother was one of them because she had her and my grandpa. They bought an old Pullman car from the railroad and had that thing right there on Young's and Arctic Avenue, man. And you talking about coffee and fish sandwiches, not sandwiches, but fish sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, yeah, they yep.
We used to see that right till the end of the 60s, right? Right till the end of the
Well, I
buses were still coming in.
I graduated in 64 and I left in 65. And when I came back, let's see. Well, I came back from the NAM for like 30 days in 68. And the change had started. Yeah, stuff was gone.
Yeah.
Some things were gone and some things were still there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I know, Joe, you've been speaking a lot, but I'm going to divert a little bit over to my dad. Like you said you served in the military.
Yes.
And when you served, it was integrated. And
Yes.
Can you speak about how that was?
Bill, these may not remember, but they drafted people into the service. And I got my draft papers in 55. And so I volunteered my draft and I entered the service February of 56. as I said, my community was basically all Caucasian, maybe other nationalities, of course. But so when I was inducted into service, I was sent to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Oh, God.
And that was my first. I was I'll tell you what.
Racist.
Somebody was in Korea. Back when I was
Racist.
put in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, they said write letters to boys in Korea, but pray for the ones in Fort Leonard Wood.
Yep. That
It
was the
was
most
rough. The
racist
Ozarks, it was
community on the
rough.
world.
Yeah, you're right. So anyway, I had to get they did the allocation for your uniforms and all that. And so there was just as many African Americans in that line as I was in. And there was nobody got any priority of what position you would be in the line. And so my first exposure with African Americans was my military. And of course, when they allocated our bunks where we would stay for our training, there was as many African Americans as there was other nationalities. And guess what? You're in the same boat and the same situation and the same concern. You all have everything in common. We ask the same questions, and what have you. And but it was my personal. So you might say, what was my personal integration involvement? It definitely was my military time, which I served 2 years in the Army, and I was in Colorado and Germany for the 6 months Colorado and almost a year and a half in Germany.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch, ja, Junge?
Oh, he's speaking German. He'll try.
I say sprechen ist bisschen.
Ein bisschen, yeah.
But anyway, yes, that was my personal experience there, and gained many friends that I still know their names to this day, even though that's a long time ago. So that was my experience in the military, and great. I went on. We called leaves. It was not leaves. When you go on a vacation, not a vacation. Can't even think of it anymore. But we'd go on a 2-week pass or something, a leave, and I went with several African American friends. We had a good time, had a great time in Hamburg, Germany. We had a great time. I remember a couple of guys we went.
Okay, now you better leave that alone.
Yeah.
I thought how nice, when I was in Michigan, my Michigan. You asked
Yes.
how you know they were Japanese. Let me tell you something. Seabrook, what was his name? Clarence? Charles?
Charles.
Seabrook. Huh?
Charles.
What was it?
Charles.
He brought all these people from California that were in
Right.
internship, and they were in prison camps. He brought them to Bridgeton. They turned out to be the best employees that he could ever have, made his company so successful. And guess who the high-ranking students in Bridgeton High School? They were all Japanese.
Yes.
Bill, you remember John Nakamura?
Yeah.
Yes.
He came to Bridgeton.
Nagayos.
Huh?
The Nagayos.
Yep.
They're, yeah.
So I know that story down a little bit. That a little bit. Okay, go ahead. That's it for me for military. For students watching, military is a great opportunity if you make the best of it. Great opportunity, great element of education goals. So, but it gets you to meeting all kinds of people in the military. And so that meant a lot to me. I learned a lot because I came from a town that did not have a diverse population. Okay.
All right. So let's see. We've talked about the military a little bit. One of the questions I had in there is the impact of sports. And you already mentioned, the players that came to Cleveland, Jackie Robinson, the integration of the leagues. Like, does anybody want to comment on how sports, like in the national scope, helped integrate our lives and maybe even in your own life as far as the teams that you played on?
How about Oprah's boyfriend, Stetson? Did he middle?
Stedman,
Stedman,
yes.
Edmund Graham. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Did you all know him?
he's from Middle Township, obviously.
Oh,
The
Yeah.
Graham
Yeah.
family, the Stedman family, the Moore family. I knew all of those. And it was funny when I found out about him and Oprah. I was in Germany at the time, and that made the international paper. And I picked it up and I kept saying, I said, Stedman Graham. Stedman Graham. Why do I know that name? Because it's kind of an odd combination of names, okay? And I said, wait a minute. I played basketball or knew that family from Jersey. And I bought the paper. Matter of fact, I still got it. And I read that and look, I was like, it just dropped. Oh, there's some Spalding had big family there. Is there still some Spaldings in Middle Township?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Oh God, the Grahams, the Moores, but yeah, that was different.
Yeah, me and Stedman were really good friends. He was a year ahead of me in
Is
school.
that right? Oh, boy.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, good guy. He was.
He's good people. Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Wow.
He was one of our. I think maybe the third person to hit 1,000 points on our basketball team too.
Oh.
In that game when he did.
I'm glad y'all had somebody to score because back in the day, man, it
He's
was
a
pitiful.
Wildwood guy.
It was pitiful. They had one guy, a big, tall, I think he was about 6'11". And back when I was playing, hey, that was an exceptional height, I can't think of that kid's name, but he messed around and blocked my shot. Okay, I got something for you now. Came back down. I think I got something like 34 points on y'all that night.
all right.
What did you do?
Basketball for Wildwood High School Warriors against the Middle Township Panthers.
I would like to say something about the professional athletes during that era too. Again, it was an era where a lot was going on. And when you think about it, you had Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had Muhammad Ali, and those folks were pretty much on what was happening in America at that time.
Role models.
Hey, the LeBron James and the others that speak out. Well, a lot of the athletes, Jim Brown, a lot of the athletes of the 60s were speaking out.
Yes.
So I can remember being at a track meet and sitting in the stands was John Carlos.
Yeah,
Yeah,
John.
I remember John Carlos, yeah.
Those
And
guys.
everybody knew what was going on,
68 Olympics.
Yep,
Was
heck of a
it the
time.
68 Olympics?
68 Olympics.
Yep.
68 Olympics, yep.
So my youngest daughter is attending the University of Alabama, and I was watching a documentary on the history of the SEC in Alabama. Bear Bryant, Bear Bryant's God down there.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I mean, again, I'm embarrassed about what I don't know. That Alabama was a segregated football team until 1970, and they actually said that USC was coming in there and cleaning a clock with an integrated team. And that's when Alabama realized that, like, we need to get with a program here. And I think it was Kentucky that actually was the first SEC team to integrate, but Alabama wasn't far behind. But I was shocked that up until 1970, Alabama was still segregated.
Alabama that was the most historically racial school. Because what was it, George Wallace? Was it Wallace? It stood on the steps. And we're not integrating the school. And then, I remember, and Mr. Bryan, you probably remember this, and Mr. Hadley and Donna, I'm quite sure this is not history to you. This was live and in living color.
It was live. It was live and in living color.
Live.
Sure was.
Yes, live and in living color.
Wow. Yep.
We lived it.
Yep, we lived it.
It might have been black and white TV, but I'm not sure.
But we survived it.
Yes,
we survived. We on this side of the dirt. That's what counts.
Mm-hmm.
There, Bill, is a good point. Bill, that's a good point. We survived it. That's a good point.
You at the door?
At that particular time, I would
Okay, I'll
estimate
be
that
right out.
15 to 20% of our students were minorities.
I gotta open up a door.
It
Just
was a
I'll
time
buy-
when there were a lot of
I gotta
young
go.
people from historically Black colleges who majored in education. So therefore, there were many, many, many jobs of teachers on all different levels here at Middle Township. Now, as far as administrators, the first minority administrator that I remember is Dr. Johnson. And that was in the 70s. But
There was
I-
one before Gloria,
there's
Mrs.
losing
Hodges. There was one before,
in this area. One before that-
Charlotte Sadler. Charlotte
Charlotte Harmon.
Harmon.
Charlotte Harmon, I'm
Charlotte
sorry.
Harmon.
Charlotte was the first one that we can think of, elementary number 1. And then, of course, Dr. Johnson was the superintendent of the district. But I don't recall at that particular time us losing a lot of minority teachers other than through attrition because so many were retiring.
We're going about an hour, and I feel like I've kind of gone through my questions here, but is there anything that anyone would like to say that they feel like has been left unsaid?
I'd like to mention one thing about Hightstown High School, which is a school I loved and always will, because it really helped me tremendously to gain a lot of knowledge and prepared me for school. However, I did have a couple of instances that were unpleasant. Number one, I always wanted to be a cheerleader. And I tried out, I think it was my sophomore year, and I made the team. I made the squad and loved it. But I was the first African-American cheerleader in the history of the school. And what we did was at the beginning of the year, we would get together and decide who was going to be the captain of the team. And that was a big thing at that time. So my senior year, we got together and I was selected as the captain of the team. And I was still the only African-American on the team. The next day after, and I was excited, went home, told my parents. The next day, the advisor came in and looked at me and said, "You're not going to be the captain of the team, of the squad." And I said, "Why?" "Well, because I wasn't here." Well, she had never been there before, but for this time, she removed me as captain. So I went home upset, and my dad being a minister, I don't know what he did, but he went to that school and gave somebody a piece of his mind. And the following day, I was put back as captain of the squad. And you know, that's something that is traumatic for a high school student to experience. Because I didn't see myself, you know, I just saw myself as a cheerleader with everyone else. But it was indicative of some of the prejudices that were existing at that time.
Gloria, I don't know what Dad would have done at that time, but he did something because he was the president of the NAACP in Hightstown.
He was.
So he was very aware of those kinds of issues. But go ahead, Dad.
Yeah, Dad did it.
Yeah. Bill, you asked about the coming together of from the sending districts into the middle and high school, and you know what that entailed. I just like Mrs. Hodges, I look at Middle Township as my home. This is my hometown. And I can remember that. And I can tell you, we, like Joe was saying earlier, we're very fortunate because there was really, people got along very, very well. Things managed, but I would not want to, I would be remiss if I did not say that there was not sore spots, where there were not incidents that happened. I have lifelong friends from my time in Middle Township High School, but I also have, thank God, not a lot, but I have a couple of scars. And I'm going to share one with you that I really wasn't able to talk about for a long time. But I'm going to do this for the students and for any of the teachers that may be watching this. I remember being a 9th grader going in to the high school. And kids, it's an awkward time. It's awkward for everybody, for the kids coming in. And I went into an art class. Now, signing up for an art class, that was usually a higher juniors and seniors. But I was pretty full of myself when it came to art because I'd won an art contest in the 8th grade and I figured I could handle it. And I was in there. But there were 2 Black students in the class, me and another student. And like everybody who's been in the classroom here knows, the first thing the teacher does is he, said by your alphabet, you sit here, here. And I found myself, in a part of the room where I guess some of the people around me may have had some issues, because almost right away, I became the target of a lot of racial abuse. And I'm telling the story because I used to wonder, does the teacher know what's going on here? Teachers, he was a fine teacher, but he didn't seem to be aware. It also bothered me years going forth that no one defended me in that area. And I'm a freshman. I don't know what to do, but I think I handled it the best way I could. I went down to the guidance office, first week of school. I didn't tell the guidance office or the guidance counselor what was going on, but I did say, I can't stand that class. And they changed that class. And that was the only incident like that I can remember standing out like that hurt. There were other incidents involving other people and different things that happened, but overall, the school had a cooperative and supportive atmosphere. But that stuck with me for a very, very long time. So my message to anyone in education is be aware of that. And for the students out there, if you have an opportunity to stand up for someone, do so. Try to muster the courage because they need it at that moment. I never took an art class again, except I got to college where we had to take one. But whatever challenge I had in that was shut off because I never took another art class in middle. So I think it's, like I said, I went a few years before being able to tell anyone that story. But I think it's important for students to hear about the damage that racism can cause.
Being in the guidance office, I heard some stories but I have to say overall, the 43 years that I have been blessed to have a job at Middle Township and all the different capacities, I always personally felt comfortable for the most part. But I did have students to come to me and I wanted to share, and I don't share names, but one situation. A student came to me once and said he had been in a social studies class and walked in as a young, maybe it was freshman or sophomore, and walked into the classroom. And the teacher said, he was wearing a dashiki. And the teacher said to him, "Where do you think you are? In Africa, hanging from the trees?" Well, I want you to know, this teacher came to me later and asked me if I knew the student. And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, and I will talk to you another day. Because if I voice my opinion to you today, it is going to be far from professional." And I did. I addressed it the next day with him. And he couldn't apologize enough. But those kind of comments can scar a young person for a long time. And they're so uncalled for. But I dealt with it. And I could have made a bigger issue out of it. But this teacher knew that I was going to be reacting to any comment made like that from that day on.
Thank you for sharing those stories. And I can tell that even though both of you are retired, you're still a teacher. You're teaching us all. And I hope that my purpose in doing this project is to be able to open up honest dialogue, not just amongst the panel that we had here tonight, but amongst the students that I teach. And I think that's the secret really for us to live in, a diverse world and understand each other. And sometimes, and I don't want to put my dad on the bus, but I know he was kind of embarrassed about the fact that he was in an all-white community. And I said, Dad, you can't be embarrassed for a wrongful thinking of your parents, and I can tell you that I was brought up to respect all races and live in it. And matter of fact, my first experience in integration was when I went to the University of South Carolina. My first roommate was a Black roommate, and my dad was like, "You know what, Billy, you're gonna learn a lot from that experience, and you should appreciate that." And I did, and I had a great experience living with Walter Knox down in South Carolina, and that was the teaching that my dad gave me, that he might not have gotten from his parents, but nevertheless, we need to, speak honestly and also learn from our mistakes, and I'm hoping that this discussion can lead our students to do the same. So. So does anybody have anything else they want to add before we sign off?
I'd like to say to Ted.
Thank you for having this panel.
Uh,
It's been very
okay. Am I?
Thank you.
Ted, Bill Hanley Sr., I want to thank you. You are a guest speaker at St. Mary's Episcopal Church on the Underground Railroad, and you did an outstanding job. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned that my son was Bill Hanley Jr., and you said, "Oh, I know him."
And let me take this a step further, because Ted,
Thank you.
Ted's been an amazing help for me getting all the projects that we're doing off the ground. And I will say right now that, Ted, you have always been a mentor of mine. And but I had forgotten that I could possibly reach out to you until my dad told me that he saw you give that speech in the Underground Railroad. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to Ted Bryan. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanley. Thank you.
It was outstanding.
Thank you very much.